Welcome to ASIC Seminar Series. I'm John, the seminar coordinator, and together with me is Miss Kathy Medley. She is our communication and IT specialist. Kathy and I will be the moderator. And today we are happy to have Dr. Santiago with us. Just a few tips before we start up. You can always find our schedule on our website, and please note that the seminar is being recorded. We'll put the recording on ASIC YouTube channel. And you can ask a vocal question by clicking on the raise hand button, and then we will unmute you. You can withdraw your request by clicking the lower hand button. You can also send us a text message through chat for your question, and we will bring up your questions to the presenter. Let me first give a brief introduction about the speaker before he starts. So Dr. Santiago Gassó has a MSc in physics from University of Buenos Aires and a PhD in geophysics and atmospheric science orientation from the University of Washington. He is an associate research scientist at NASA GSFC and ASIC. His core expertise is in aerosol remote sensing with UV to VIIRS passive sensing. He's a PI of MODIS VIIRS science team. His independent research activities include studies of absorbing aerosols, remote detection of marine aerosol, observation of volcanic emission on clouds, and characterization of high-altitude dust and its links with the marine biogeochemical cycles and paleoclimate. It is through his active research participation in the NAAPS subject that leads to the invitation to participate in the trip subject of this talk. Let's welcome the speaker, and I will give the ball to speaker Santiago, please.
Okay.
Start.
Yeah, let me see my, suddenly the mouse disappeared. Where's my mouse? Here. Oh, okay, good. Yes. Oh, hello, everybody. This is Santiago Gassó. Like I said, I work at Goddard Space Flight Center, and well, I'm just glad that I have the chance to do this. I just realized when I was talking about arranging the dates, we settled in June 15th. And then I thought, well, what I was doing exactly a year ago, and this is what I was exactly a year ago, in the middle of the Atlantic. In fact, I was just north of the equator, and yeah, and it's been a year. I've been to this cruise, and the opportunity of giving this talk is great because it just helps me to reflect and think about a little bit about what it was all this about, and it was a fantastic experience, and I have plenty of pictures that I like to share. I'm gonna give you some highlights of that. So again, just to start, this is a little bit of the summary of the trip. It happened a year ago. The trip itself, the cruise, was 4 weeks. And I was invited to come and be an instructor during a summer school. It was on oceanography. And I was the remote sensing instructor. There were several models to be taught, and I was teaching the remote sensing one. And also I brought with me some instrumentation to make aerosol measurements. And also, just to point out, this ship was not only doing some research along the way, but also it was doing some training and preparation for the Mosaic project, which is the deployment of a ship going over and being stranded in the Arctic, in the ice, for almost a year. Actually, the ship, in this trip in particular, the ship did the resupply of all German Antarctic stations. So they first left Bremerhaven, they went to Cape Town, South Africa, and from there they went to Antarctica. From Antarctica they went, I did a research campaign in the South Georgia Island and the Drake Passage, and then they went to the Falkland Islands where I got in, and then we went back to Germany. And on the way, I had to go to Santiago of Chile, Punta Arenas, and I'm going to be showing you some pictures of that section of the trip, which is also was very interesting. So just a little bit about myself. I wanted to remind, this opportunity of traveling brings me back to something previous life of me. During my 20s, I used to do sailing, and in big boats. I used to be crew of one of those boats. In fact, the ship that you see there, the A-22 sail, that's the ship, the boat I was sailing in. And the reason is because when I was studying physics in Argentina, I worked for a couple of years in a sail factory that's called North Sails, and it was the biggest company there, and it was the time when they were starting to do using computers. So basically, I was the computer guy doing the design of the sails. The main point of that is because in 1989, when I was working there, the race around the world stopped by nearby Buenos Aires, where I lived in the city of Punta del Este, and it happened that one of the ships abandoned the race, and they needed to take the ship back to, I think it was England, and they offered me if I wanted to be one of the crew members to take the ship back to England, and of course I said yes without knowing what it meant, but eventually I didn't make it. For other reasons I couldn't go, and the offer fell through. So, but yeah, just it was that idea of cruising the Atlantic is something that I can't it's remain with me. So anyways, everything, if we move forward, I came to the United States and I started to work as a scientist, and in the 2007 I happened to be organizing a workshop in Argentina. It was a workshop about dust, which is one of my favorite subjects. And in this very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary meeting, we had it was a great of fun. A lot of important researchers. I don't expect you to know all of them. Some of them are in the cloud community and the dust community. Some of them are senior people right now at NASA. But the person to focus on is on Peter Krut here, because he was a marine biogeochemist, and he showed up in 2007. Since then, I talked to him just a couple of times, and suddenly he, out of the blue, came up with an email saying if I wanted to participate in this summer school, an invitation. And of course, I said yes. But well, I said yes, of course, after spousal approval. So then, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this cruise. So I was invited to go on the Polarstern, which is basically the insignia research vessel of Germany. It's one of the most storied ones, one of the first one, and there are better ships right now, but it was the first one, built in 1982. It's huge. It's it's longer than a football field. It's an icebreaker. So, for example, it has very thick walls. It's very expensive to operate, as you can see, and it was almost 100 million euro, 1982. So imagine, and but it was very, like all German things, very well built. It felt very comfortable there. It's just like when you feel like you get on a Mercedes-Benz or BMW, you go in and you feel safe. And even though it's an icebreaker, it was crossing oceans, but it didn't shake much at all. It was just very safe. So anyway, so in my trip, I had to go through Chile, and I did that almost a year ago. That was May 27, which is of course winter down there. And I had this is a picture of me arriving to Santiago of Chile, which many of you who work on pollution is famous for the pollution. And this is the example of what you see when you arrive there. But also something else, I mean, that was Santiago of Chile was the stepping stone to get to Punta Arenas. And it happens, I'm gonna show you a few pictures of this trip to get to Punta Arenas, because it happened something unusual. In that trip to the south tip of South America, it happened that it was a very clear sky day, absolutely clear, which is extremely unusual. For myself, I look at satellite pictures all the time of this part of the world. It's really unusual to see. And I happen to have a window seat and like 3 cameras and everything. So just a few pictures of what we can see from there. So my suggestion, if you ever do this, remember to get a left side seat, window seat on the plane. So this is, for example, looking at west. Back there is the Atlantic Ocean. We are looking towards Argentina right now, no? And this is one of the last ice fields in the world. And if you look with details, you can see glaciers, and it's just mesmerizing, so beautiful. And I didn't stop taking pictures. It was so beautiful. So, for example, there you have the Mount Fitzroy, which is one of the favorite climbing places. I mean, anyone who climbs is one of the places you must see. Look at that. It's so jagged and pointy. And there on the right-hand side, you see a glacier going into Argentina. And back there, the Atlantic Ocean. And look at the haze. I mean, I'm into hazes and aerosols. Even in this clean part of the world, you have quite a bit of haze. So then, for example, this is the Torres of Paine in Chile. This is a very famous national park. I happen to be, I've been there. Those little towers there, I think, over there, those little towers, I hiked down to the base of these towers in the early 90s. And it's just one of the most gorgeous places in the world. So more pretty pictures, glaciers ending in very colorful lakes surrounded by snow. So then we get to Punta Arenas, which is, by the Magellan Strait, the southern tip of South America. I mean, it's not the southernmost city. There are other cities, but Punta Arenas happened to be a big town, has a large airport, has a deep water harbor. I mean, it's so big. They have, I think they have 120,000 people there. They have a big university. It has a really nice layout. So it's just very, and it's just it happens to be the stepping stone in your trip to Antarctica. A lot of United States and research field campaigns make a stop in Punta Arenas on the way to cross the Drake Passage and go to Antarctica. So then what happens in Punta Arenas, we have first contact. And with this, what it means, just remember, I got this invitation in late 2018 from someone I haven't seen for 10 years. And he's inviting me to come aboard of a ship, and I did not know anybody except this person who I have seen 10 years ago. So I was a little bit apprehensive of what I was going to see. So I'm going to give you just a brief description of what the components and the crew who came with me. And so here I am in Punta Arenas. Oh, so the whole, I mean, something to mention is, well, who organized this? This was organized by the Alfred Wegener Institute based in Bremerhaven. This is equivalent to the Woodhull Institution of Oceanography in the United States, or the Scripps Institute of Oceanography in San Diego. They have their research vessel. I mean, the research vessel belongs to the German government, is run by this institute. And also what they do is they fundraise money from other foundations basically to pay for the cost of researchers like me and instructors and the students to come. And so yeah, so that's to get out of the way. So basically we have a technical and scientific crew. That's the instructors. We were led by a chief scientist, and the boss. She was not only the chief scientist, but she was also the official representative of the company and she was the commander in chief of the captain. So she was the one giving orders to the captain. And then we have on the left hand side, you see all the technical and crews. We have, meteorologists, researchers, and instructors, doctors. We have some, in this case, we have some redundancy, like 2 medical doctors, 3 meteorologists, because they were in training. They were training exactly for the Mosaic expedition. We were 50% German, then instructors from other countries. One of the instructors was Peter Lemke, who happens to be a world-renowned researcher. I didn't know, but because he's not in my field, but he was a very well-known researcher in RC and interactions, RC ice and climate. He was one of the lead authors of the IPCC 2007, the one that won the Nobel Prize. So it was a pleasure. There in the bottom right, he's standing next to me. It was a pleasure to be next to someone so knowledgeable, and he was always sharing. And so at the back there is the instructors and the group, and which is a mixture of graduate students, postdocs, and researchers. Then you have the crew, which about 45 people, also very with a young captain. As I understand, it was his second cruise as a captain. We have 2 of everything, a lot of redundancy, including helicopter pilots, which they didn't seem to be relevant for our trip, but they were relevant in the previous campaign they did right before. And we have, someone in charge of, doing your laundry and linens. Some tidbits, for example, of course, the most important people had the best cabins. That means the ones that with the best views, the best, most space. But I realized not necessarily the best in everything, because the best cabins are the ones are up there in the top decks, which is the place where it shakes the most in the ship. So it wasn't that great if you get seasick, and there were I will talk about that later. Something to note: the pilots had private rooms, and it's not because they were pilots; it's just the contract they had. The company that ran the ship had a contract with the pilot company, and it's just by contract. So, which is, it was, the cabins in a ship is such a precious commodity, and there is a lot of hierarchies and who's above who's at place. In my case, of course, I had to share the room with somebody I didn't know. Very good English, everybody, and everybody was super nice. There were a few women too, sailors. And what I mean, the rules did not apply the same to everybody. I mean that even though everything was by the rules, for example, it was not allowed to smoke, and we the crew, the technical staff and scientists and students did not smoke, but the crew smoked everywhere, and it was very annoying because they would smoke in the rooms. And apparently, again, by contract, the crew had absolute power inside the cabins. They could do anything they wanted, including smoking, which was, because the AC system ended up bothering everybody. So then we have the students. It was interesting because it was a very diverse group. A lot of women. It was a group of very intelligent people. there were a lot of applications, and ended up being very representative of the world. I think there were, if you call from developed countries, I mean, you had one from Germany, one from Ireland. I think that's it from the Western world. And then you have like 7 from South America, one from Palestine, from Greece, from Israel, and also very diverse backgrounds. These were students like, senior level to first year of PhD, second year, very diverse in the sense of they were doing communications or all related to ocean studies, ocean biology, physical oceanography, very diverse. That I think it was a little bit difficult for the teaching part. And like I said, we were very dedicated. I remember this is we are at the hotel in Punta Arenas, and I'm there on the left watching TV. I think it was the day of the Champions League final, but the students didn't care at all. They were all in their laptops and uploading software that I have brought with me for the class. So then again, we had to reach to the polar stand, which was docked at the Malvinas Island. And then we're here, and the bottom left, we are it's me with a Russian. I mean, you meet people along the way, and this happens to be my seatmate, and we were just about to get on the plane, and he was a Russian sailor. He was going to the Falkland Islands because he was going to get on his ship. It was also docked there, and because it happens to be, fisheries and fishing boats use the Falkland Islands as a stopping point. I mean, there isn't not many places where you can go in that part of the world. So, and he happened to be very outgoing, very funny. And there, well, you see, you don't get to see. I took that picture. You don't get to see many. Images of, that you're taking a plane to the Malvinas Island. And also, you don't get too many instances where you see planes going to a city named after me. So that was, I found funny. So again, and then Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, I was there only for 90 minutes, unfortunately. So I landed at the airport, and then I got on a van, and we drove to the other side of the island where the ship wasn't there. And also it was awful weather, very damp, gray, drizzling, so I wasn't able to see much. It didn't look very inspiring, but again, it was the middle of the winter. It just looked like Wales. If you've been to Wales, it just looked flat, gray, green. Anyway, but anyway, I will go again if I have the chance. At least I got a nice stamp in my passport. So again, we got to the other side of the island. We had to get on a boat because the polar stand was so big that it would not fit. It would not dock in the harbor. So it was docked outside. So we just that's the view when I was arriving, and it's just it's a beauty. And it was sunset, and there what you see is the boat with the previous group of passengers. You have to climb the ladder. So then when you get in there, first I get to meet my roommate who, again, I had no idea who I was going to share the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then it happens to be Sandy Orlic. He's a marine biologist based on Croatia. And I'm so glad because he happened to be really nice and very funny guy. I didn't know, but I have not met many Croatians, but they are like from the Adriatic near Italy, and they happen to be very funny, like Italians, outgoing and moving your hands and things like that. So we were Sandy and Santi. That's how people make fun of us. So then you get the first 3 days is kind of a roller coaster. It's just too many things to deal with. First of all, space, tiny cabins, tiny hallways, the full schedule. Everything is under a schedule, so you have to adapt. The good thing is food was fantastic, and I'll show you some pictures of that. Then start to get involved with the classes you're going to be dealing with, meeting the students, conversations with your fellow instructors. Finding your way around the ship is very confusing, super confusing. You lose, everything is narrow, just you lose your way around. You don't know what deck you are, if you're underwater, above water. It's just difficult. Then, well, one of the routines is that every day we have daily briefings at the end after dinner, 2 hours every day, which was tiring. It was a bit too much. It had a purpose. It had a purpose, and there were good things to learn about it. But it's just too much time every day. Then get around the rules of the ship, and like I said, well, it's German, so there's rules everywhere. But then you have to learn the rules that are not written and what people do and don't do, even if it's written. That took some time. And then, well, the first few days, seasickness, ship motion. Fortunately, the weather was all right, so the ship motion wasn't too bad. Not bad for me, but I could see the impact. Some people got sick for weeks. I mean, basically, some students could not take classes. And in my case, it took 24 hours, and I didn't throw up. But I was very sleepy, fortunately, and nothing else. Nothing else. And then, of course, getting used to the claustrophobic environment. I mean, well, the point about that is that I mentioned about smoking earlier. Yeah, in the first 4 days, I started to get this bad cough, and everybody started to get sick and like getting colds. You know, we are talking about the coronavirus there. That was the best example of how things propagate because everyone got sick on top of the seasickness. So it wasn't very pleasant. The good thing is, I mean, at least the ship didn't move very much. But in my case, for example, I had a cold and I had to get pills because I was coughing too much, exacerbated by the smoke. And this is the typical day. As you can see, you know, your day gets filled with things to do all the time. And if I had some spare time, you know, you work on your presentations, lectures, office hours. I have brought my own work, do measurements of the instruments that I brought. And then if I had to do, you know, mental health, gym. So that's how I mean, and it's good to be busy because I was told before coming to this trip is that I was told you're gonna get very bored, and the routines are very important because getting bored is the worst that it can happen. You just could get depressed, and that's why I brought immense amounts of work with me to work on my own and keep focus on my research. And actually, those things came up because after 20 days of doing exactly the same thing every day, seeing everyone every day, you get tired and boredom kicks in. So a little bit about pictures about what it is like, the cabin. I'm using a fisheye lens here. Kind of looks spacious. It's not spacious. It's just enough. It has a very 80s retro look, a lot of plastic. Well, of course, it was designed in the 80s, but it was very functional, very comfortable. Immediately, I learned that we have a laundry service, which I loved. It was great, super cheap. I had to pay for that, but it was fine. We had some fantastic view. Unfortunately, we could not open the window. But yeah, but that was my the place I stayed, and it was it was very comfortable. Just like I said, I mean, it was maybe a little bit low ceiling, so sometimes you get a little bit claustrophobic. But again, if you feel like you just go outside, you can go to the deck. Oh, the food was excellent. I mean, those chefs on board, they were just like, yes, everything was great. I mean, maybe maybe one of the issues was that the veggies, the fresh food ran out quickly, which is understandable. You could eat at any time. There was always food left over, and you could access that, and that was great too. Tea time, they have the tea time ceremony. I mean, like at the same time as the English, but they have cakes. Apparently cakes is a tradition, and the cakes were just fantastic. And they would do also in the mornings for breakfast, bread. They would bake their own bread, and also that was fantastic. So food-wise, that was great. In fact, I had to cut it because it was clearly gonna I was gonna gain weight for that, and I started to skip lunches because it was just too much of good stuff, and yeah, so I had to cut it short. So again, life on board, the weather was pretty good, and you can see that on the second day I was wearing jackets and wool caps, but as you can see in the background, there wasn't much shaking, not much waves. But 2 days later, I mean, I was already wearing t-shirts, and this is Southern Hemisphere winter, so it was, I think we were lucky. We were lucky about the weather, but not necessarily always was like, I mean, we had choppy days, not necessarily the ship shook, but we can see here as an example of the waves, and also a close-up of a gate that was hit by a wave, and look at how much it has deformed. And that was one of the nights I was there, and I didn't hear any loud noise of anything. Just the ship is so good at this. But you can see the violence of the waves, and the cool thing is that the crew repaired that in a few days, and they had a new gate repaired. Like, I don't know, German efficiency, if you want. Life on board, we had those at the briefing room, seminars. That's actually a live telecom. We were doing from the middle of the ocean. We were doing video calls with back to Germany. There was a big outreach component in the boat, and they were doing live streaming to high schools and middle schools, and they had kids participating, which of course, I mean, it's cool. I mean, you're talking to people in the middle of the ocean. In this case, we are doing the same, but with the guy that you see in the screen is the German astronaut. Germany has one astronaut who has been at the space station, and it's like here, national figure, and he does a lot of outreach and these kind of things. So then, for example, I started. I gave a presentation. I think I was one of the very first ones. I talked about volcanoes, which is the South Sandwich Islands are the islands they just visited. It was prior to this trip. They visited the South Sandwich Islands, and I happened to be doing some research on those volcanoes, so I gave a presentation. And then with things like this, we have to do drills, safety drills all the time. We have to go out there, put the life jackets, and the funny thing, I mean, I had, this looked very sturdy and very serious life jacket. I was told not by the crew, but somebody else said that when you jump in the water with those jackets, you have to be very careful because the big block in the back can hit you so hard in the back of your neck that you can faint. So it's a hazard, which I find it very funny if you're trying to save your life and then you hit yourself with the life jacket. What else? Oh yeah, so I had to make sense of the signs along. Some of them were just obvious. Some of them were kind of amusing. Some of them I just don't know. I mean, for example, the upper right one here, I don't know why the one scientists to get together at the deck. Nobody could explain this. A lot of bathroom etiquette. And of course, apparently, there is an issue with pirates and terrorists, and you have to be careful with the doors. Oh yeah, well, internet. Well, there was Wi-Fi throughout the ship. Like you saw, we did the streaming from the ship, but the connection available to all of us was not good. It was very slow. You could not do streaming. You can barely check your Google account, email. But you could do texting, WhatsApp, or if you have if you were clever on how to shrink pictures, you could, send them via Twitter or WhatsApp. And I did that. Basically, I was keeping my Twitter account active, sending pictures in Spanish and English. That was fun. That was fun. So then, a little bit of a yeah. I mean, it's so big that they have have a helipad and they have helicopters. Helicopters are mostly for polar research, particularly when the ship is designed to be stranded in ice. It can stay there, and that's what they did for the Mosaic expedition. So when they are anchored in ice, they use helicopters to move around, bring equipment. And the second helicopter is redundancy. They just want to have a second helicopter in case the first one fails. Yeah, I mean, you have to probably look for pick things up, pick people up. But also the helipad was, the relaxation deck where people go on and relax. Those are students taking a break. Because remember, you want to take a day off and you don't have any place to go in this place, and people will go to the helipad to, sunbathe and relax and sleep, take naps. Life on board, there was a lot of social life, purposely organized because just to break with the tediousness of everything. There were barbecues, I mean, one thing that it was pretty amusing to me is that there was open bar. I mean, you could drink alcohol at any time, anywhere. And that's a big contrast with American ships, which is prohibited. I think in French ships also is prohibited. But having a cold beer and a hot afternoon and look at the horizon from the ship, that really did it. That was fantastic. Well, they have barbecues and they have pretty big barbecues, and sometimes we got to try really exotic things. In this case, because the ship had been to South Africa, they pick up some antelope meat, ostrich meat, so weird fish meats. It was pretty good, really pleasure. Then a little bit about what you could do. Like I said, the hallways were very narrow, and look at the light and the color, so 80s, plasticky. There are two swimming pools, one outdoors, which is just a container, but it had a fantastic view. And then there is an indoor swimming pool. You can see there, the bottom right, which was really, I did go in. It was difficult. The indoors swimming pool is really designed for when you are docked in the ice field. It's just when the ship is static. But here, for example, we're sailing and there is a standing wave. You can see the wave there in the in the swimming pool. So they opened it up a few times and then they had to empty it. In the back, in the indoor swimming pool, you can see in the back the gym, and I will go there regularly. Once I realized I was starting to gain weight, I started to go to the gym very consistently. And one thing is because you are going through international waters, officially, if you purchase something, it cannot be taxed. So the ship had little a free shop, and they would sell goodies, they would sell chocolate, they would t-shirts, and most importantly, they will sell alcohol at extremely low values. Really good bottles of whiskey go for 25 euros, which was the same bottle would have been, $50 or $60 in any normal place. So everything was big. This is just a highlight. I mean, from the deck, you can see the engine room, the control room of the engine. You can see one of the shafts. You can see the anchor, the deck. It was just massive. And again, it felt very safe. And one of the treats that I had every day is watching the sunrise and the sunset. It was that was just worth the trip itself. It's fantastic. Just you get to go, and overall, I'm glad we had good weather. So as you can see, the sea was always calm and very enjoyable. And one thing to note is that when you go from South America to Germany in 4 weeks, you have to go through 6 time zones. And so every 4 or 5 days, we would change the local time on the ship, which was very annoying. I was always jet lagged. But anyway, that helped me to get up early and see these things like this. Really pretty. Oh, a few words about teaching. The class, basically, the 25 students were divided in 5 groups, and there were 5 teaching models in different subjects. So basically, each group would go through a teaching model, 4 or 5 days each. There will be measurements and lectures. And in my case, I was teaching how to make measurements with the instrumentation I brought, and I was teaching about aerosols, and I was teaching about remote sensing. So frankly, nothing very sophisticated, because there wasn't much time to get into details. One limitation is that it was extremely diverse group, culturally, academically. So, and you have to teach to everybody. So frankly, it was a challenge, and things were rushed at times. But it was interesting to see they were very capable, bright students. So that was a pleasure to see them interacting. So we had classes, we have laboratory rooms, we have pretty decent laboratories, computer rooms. Teaching, there I'm teaching in one of the few places where we had a board. But anyways, it was very acceptable for teaching. Then we have work with the students. They will do the equivalent of field work. There, we not only have our research meteorologist Andreas doing the radiosondes, but also we will have the equivalent of the radiosonde, which is the CTD. The CTD is that device on the left, is the equivalent of the radiosonde for oceanographic applications. It measures CTD, is conductivity, temperature, depth. Conductivity measures how much salinity is in the water. Temperature, temperature, and depth measures the pressure. So basically what you end up doing is things like you have in the lower right. You get a temperature profile of the atmosphere and a temperature profile of under the ship. And you can do this. And this is a slide that I prepared for some of the outreach activities we were doing. It was fun. So up there, you can see a picture of Andreas. He's one of the meteorologists. One thing that I found really disheartening is that it was very difficult to talk about the atmosphere with anybody, because they were all oceanographers, so nobody will come and ask me questions. So the recent meteorology, the synoptic meteorologists were the closest to atmospheric scientists, and it happened that Andreas was the most interested one in talking to me, but he didn't have good English, so it was just like, but it was a lot of good intention and having fun actually in communicating. Also, a lot of additional research activities more for the German government. Here on the left, what we have is called the Argo float. It's a float that basically it's a robot. You just drop it in the water, it sinks, it measures and temperature, all the meteorological, the equivalent of meteorological. It sinks and also measures ocean biology parameters like chlorophyll and some other biological compounds, and it goes down and then it goes up again by itself, gets to the surface, broadcasts to the satellite, and then it sinks again. It's just pretty fantastic tool. And also the ship had a sonar, and they were mapping the floor, which, you know, I just learned the seafloor, the global seafloor, we don't know anything about it. We have very coarse maps, and these trips are part of the creating the global map of the ocean. And of course, in my case, studying aerosols, I was using that as part of I had the students take measurements here. In the upper right, well, you can see myself here making measurements with this little portable instrument. It measures aerosols or particles. Basically, what it does, it gets a measurement of the concentration, how much aerosols are over there. We would post that in social media. It was good because also these same instrument measurements were incorporated into the NASA database of global measurements of aerosols over the ocean. So this was part of the NASA participation in this trip. So of course I got to be at the equator, which was a pretty momentous in the sense of I'm at the equator. How many times do you get to do that? That I'm in 000, which at that time I was, you know, thousands of kilometers away from any coast. It was great. And then we kept going north, and we went to under the ITCZ, those clouds that are near the equator almost always. Again, very lucky. We didn't get any bad storm or heavy convection. It was very uneventful. Oh, sorry. And then, of course, aerosols were present everywhere. We had the sea salt aerosols coming from the waves. They would fall into the deck, and the water would evaporate, and you will get those sea salt grains. Also, you get at the bottom left, you have these hazes showing up. The instrumentation on board will indicate very low aerosol concentration, yet you will see those hazes, which is pretty normal. And then in the bottom right is actually a very thick haze. That's a dust storm, and I'm going to show you more pictures about that. Yeah, we happened to be crossing while going near Cape Verde. We were next to the Africa coast, and we went under a dust storm. And you could see that very clearly. Dust will start, you would not feel it yourself. I mean, it was just, you will see a very hazy day, foggy, but then you will see the remains of the dust in the areas exposed to the wind, like I'm showing there with my finger. And then during the sunset, you will get those very spectacular, fuzzy sun looks. So this is just a satellite view of where I was going. It was a 3-day transect, and we went under the dust cloud on the left. And then on the right is basically just an idea of the measurements. What we measured is the aerosol optical depth, which gives you an idea of the aerosol concentrations. And the colors give you an idea of, well, how high the concentrations were. And, you know, the red ones is where we were under the under the dust cloud. The only plot to show what is important here is just the blue line. The blue line is the aerosol optical depth, which is what we measured with those instruments as a function of latitude. So you can see a little bit, follow the blue line, is the left y-axis. You can see where the values were low at the beginning. Then we got to Cape Verde, and the values were in the 0.7, 0.8, and then it dropped again until we got to the English Channel, where the pollution became more apparent, but not as bad as the dust event. And the red line is the spectral dependence, which is a parameter we use to distinguish between different aerosol types. And you can see here during the Cape Verde area, where we were under the dust, the spectral dependence, the red line is low, and which is typical of dust. This is what I was expecting to see. So anyways, this is just to illustrate our measurements reflect what we were expecting. So that's it. That's all the science I wanted to discuss. Oh, wildlife. Yeah, you have a wildlife when you go there. Actually, it was extremely difficult to see. I would go out with Peter and our cameras and try to capture something, but it was, I mean, they would go, you would see them in the distance, and your zoom would not be good enough, or they would be too fast. But I got to see whales, but it was just too difficult to capture a picture. So some of these pictures are mine, some of them I borrowed. We all exchanged, and it was kind of the hobby, who gets the best picture. But there were flying fish, dolphins, sharks. Again, this is just a selection, and yeah, very difficult to take pictures. So then after 3 weeks, we arrived, 3 weeks, I mean, 3 weeks of doing exactly the same. And by now we were just starting to get tired. In fact, I remember in day 16, 17 of our trip, the chief scientist in our daily briefings, she said, okay, it's more than 2 weeks since we left. By now you should start to experience depression. And we were like, what? And yeah, and like 2-3 days later, you started to feel different. It's just the whole thing of doing exactly the same thing every day was starting to wear you down. But then we arrived to civilization. A few things. We were there only for 7 hours. It was a resupply and uploading of new crew members, exchange. For example, my cabin member, my roommate had to leave because he had a family emergency. So also we had cell phone connection, which was fantastic. And it's something that we kind of knew, because I would see the crew would start to talk over a day or 2 days before. You would see the crew talking over their cell phones outside on the deck, and that surprised me, because it was like apparently when you start to get near populated places, you start to see oil rigs, and the oil rigs have their own cell phone towers. So if you happen to be in a ship that passes by, you could use your phone, and that's what they were using, the crew members in the middle of nowhere. But when I was in Gran Canary Island, I was able to call home, call family, and it was great. But at the same time, it was interesting because it was just like the beginning of the end. Just realize, oh, we are approaching civilization. But the one thing is, we got tomatoes, and we got we got the green stuff, because by now we were start to get tired of eating sauerkraut and potatoes and pasta and again sauerkraut, potatoes, and even with different flavors, because the chefs were fantastic. But I was really missing a good tomato or a good salad. So now we started the second half of the trip, which was more what I would call it more apparent, the anthropogenic presence, because obviously you would start to see contrails, you would start to see more haze, noises, and also this anxiety of realize, oh, I have 6-7 days to get to Germany and then back home, because by then I was already starting to get tired, and all the fascination of the trip was just going away. I just wanted to go home. So this is a little bit of what you start to see: oil rigs everywhere, and they're fantastic monsters. It's just a fantastic piece of engineering. Even from my own cabin, you started to see all these ships going through, and like very pretty little sailboats going. It was very interesting too. But again, a reminder of the anthropogenic presence in the northern Atlantic. That was pretty remarkable. We got to the English Channel, which it just felt like going on the Beltway. This is like, I think this was like mid-morning. Over there, you can see the famous Dover Cliffs with the white walls. but also look at how many ships were there. I remember counting, just standing up on the deck and counting around me, and I counted 13 ships just going in one direction or the other. Sometimes they would go perpendicular to you. It would be like in the bottom left, what you see is a ferry, one of the many ferries going from Belgium to England. And then, of course, wind power. Those windmills were everywhere. So eventually we made it to Bremerhaven, where we arrived at the time of a heat wave in Germany, and it was just pretty shocking because it was as bad as the equator. And of course, here is the time to say goodbye, and we all. But again, I was just sick and tired of being on the boat, and I really like everybody, but I just wanted to be back home and be in new places. But again, this was a little bit. This is just to wrap up a little bit of the end, and ended up being a fantastic experience. Here's a picture of me with all the students. It was just something like now I remember very fondly, even though, like I said, at the end I was super tired. But I think I will do it again. I mean, not necessarily this year. Well, I can't this year, but hopefully an invitation. I think they liked me enough. Hopefully the invitation comes again. They do this every 3-4 years, so we'll see where we are at in 3-4 years. So I guess this is it. I guess I can take questions. Anything you're curious about? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Santiago. It's an excellent talk. So, any questions?
Let me see. I think I can see.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, people can send questions via chat. Like they could type out their questions in the chat, or they can raise their hand, and I will unmute them. Either is fine with me. Okay, I got one question. So did the ship motion result in AOD uncertainty?
I don't know. It happened. Basically, the question refers to if I could account in my aerosol measurement, if I could account for the error introduced by the ship motion. Frankly, it just didn't feel like you were moving. I think if there was more error, it would be by the operator trying to point the instrument into the sun than the ship itself. All the instances where I was making we were making measurements, the ship was so stable, so big that it would only shake noticeably when it was really, really strong wind, and you're not making measurements then. So yeah. So I would say no, there was no. No, I would say, for example, I was always checking the wind speeds, and we had wind speeds in the 17, 16 meters per second, and the ship still was fairly stable. Didn't bother at all.
Okay, thank you. We just got another question too. So do you know how students can apply for the next campaign?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's I don't know how the promotion for this happened. It's one of the things they do, social media. I don't know, because I didn't participate on that. It's one of the things that it's up to the students to look for that, or the respective universities or academic departments to make the students aware of that. Certainly, when it reaches me, I forward it to the places that I think might be interested. Yeah. And nowadays, I post everything in social media, things like this.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We can wait a minute or two if people are typing too.
A follow-on question from me. So basically, it's a free ship for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for students, yes, you have to go through a selection process. You submit an application. There were, in this case, there were 800 applications. It was super competitive. I did participate a little bit on the reviews. You got all sorts of people applying. I do not remember if anybody of the ones I reviewed was selected. There was a clear bias on what they wanted to do. They have 25 slots, and they wanted to have a good worldwide representation from developing countries, and they wanted to have a clear majority of women. So those are things that they did. I mean, it was 60 or 70% women, and yeah, and clearly those from Western countries were in the minority. No Western, I mean, like, more developed countries were in the minority. There were like 7 from South America. I mean, there was someone from Mauritius Island. You know where Mauritius Island is? There was someone from Madagascar. I never met someone from Madagascar. That was, they really try hard to, incorporate people from places that, regularly don't get access to this kind of things.
Great.
We do have another question. What about the night sky? Could you see the change from one hemisphere to the other?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Being at the equator was quite a thing because we made a stop to, have a barbecue that evening. And yes, and I was able to see the Southern Cross and the Big Dipper at the same time because I was at the equator, seeing it both ways. Myself, I'm not much of an astronomer, but there are a couple of things. I mean, I can recognize a few stars, and that was the highlight that I remember the most. It was difficult to have a telescope or binoculars at night to watch, to look at stars, because there was it was difficult to coordinate. There was some ship movement, which was easy. I mean, it was slow, but it was difficult to keep your binoculars on focus. Yeah, but other than the nights, the southern hemisphere, it was out of the 16 days in the southern hemisphere, I think we had like 13 cloudy days. It was very, I could verify. I mean, for all of us who do remote sensing and are interested in the southern hemisphere and southern ocean in particular, it is true. It's very cloudy there. You can see it from below.
One more, unless other people have questions. Did you have access to the internet all the time?
Yes. Actually, what they did is they gave me a Polarsten email account. So they gave me an account in the server. So what I did, basically, I put a forwarding address, or auto reply in my local account saying, I'm in the ship. If you want to contact me, send an email to the Polarsten. So that could be checked all the time. But again, it didn't allow for attachments. It was all text. Same with Wi-Fi when you were doing WhatsApp. WhatsApp was great because I would communicate with my family almost all the time. And a little trick that I found with WhatsApp and Twitter is that if you take a picture with your phone and then you use a little app to shrink the picture, then you attach the shrunk picture into Twitter, it will go out immediately. If, on the contrary, if you would take a picture and send it to Twitter right away, it will not go out because it was such a big picture. So those are the little tricks you learn. Yeah, so the Wi-Fi was okay. Only people higher in the chain had better access to Wi-Fi. Although I should say, when we had the dust storm, when we went under the dust storm, I requested a special download, and I was able to download GFS files to wind assimilations to run high split, and they let me do that. And I was able to download almost a gigabyte of data in a few hours, which as far as the chip is concerned, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Here's another. This person says, great presentation. Does Scientists for Future accept applications to participate in campaigns if one is a small business working in remote sensing of the atmosphere?
I don't know. It depends on the year. Germans are open to these kind of things. It's just, I'm not saying no. In this case, I did not see it, but I mean, they're open. It's just a matter of discussing it. And but again, it all depends on the year they start to plan this. Like I said, they will start to plan this maybe in 2 years. It highly depends on the money they have available, because the German government is only providing the ship itself. I mean, the German government pays for the crew, pays for running the ship, and the institute that organizes this has to get the money to pay for the students, all the visa applications, which is very messy, bringing people like me. So they have to cover those costs. In my case, for example, they paid for everything but my salary. So I had to negotiate at work to let me go there. So they would not pay your salary unless you have a specific measurement that they're interested in to do. Yeah.
Great, that's so interesting. I actually found the link, since we've had quite a few questions about participation. I went ahead and found the link, so if anyone's really interested in participating, they can go ahead, follow the link, and you can read about expeditions. Yeah, you can click around and maybe you can find an application or find more information about it.
All right. Then let's call the end, and let's thank the speaker again for his excellent presentation. And I also want to thank everyone for coming. And we do, just a reminder, we do have one more seminar next Monday. So I look forward to seeing you next Monday. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Santiago.
Santiago.
That was great.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.